Greetings and welcome to the Wild Swans at Coole. Today's video is on humanism, uh, effects on Renaissance philosophy with Scholasticism and Avorrism. Let's begin the video without any delay. Philosophical sense of humanism begins essentially with the humanistic realism of Ludwig Feuerbach, later included Marxist humanism, existentialist humanism, humanist pragmatism, ethical humanism. Though the term humanism can trace its origin only back to the 19th century, the term humanist is attested in Latin and Italian as early as the second half of the 15th century, where it refers to university teachers of humanities lecturing on the ancient authors. That means humanism, philosophy. Humanism and philosophy. This connection begins with Ludwig Feuerbach, which later includes Marxist humanism, existentialist humanism, and humanist pragmatism, ethical humanism. In the second half of the 15th century, this humanism, the term humanism refers to the university teachers of humanities who lectures on ancient authors. By that date, the sort of literary figures called humanists in modern Renaissance scholarship had been around for more than a century, most commonly referred to by their contemporaries as literati, poetae, or orators. Chiefly, they served as teachers of the classics in schools and universities, political secretaries and chancellors, court poets, diplomats, bureaucrats, language specialists, in other words. In other words, the Italian humanists of the Renaissance created a new form of culture. That means, in modern Renaissance, the term humanist refers to literati, poetae, or orators. And what was their job? Their job was they were served as teachers of classics in schools and universities. They were court poets, they were chancellors, they were diplomats, they were bureaucrats, and language specialists. Now let's move on to the other part. We will come Avorrist in the last section of the video. Now read this. For humanist philosophy is demoted to the position of one branch of literature among several. The emphasis is placed on moral philosophy, the only part of the philosophy. Metaphysics, psychology, and natural philosophy are neglected when not only openly mocked for their obscurity and triviality. Logic is subordinated to rhetoric and is reserved to serve the purposes of persuasion. That means the metaphysics, psychology, and natural philosophy are neglected, but humanist philosophy's position was humanist philosophy in the branch of literature was positioned very low, and metaphysics, psychology, natural philosophy, these are not given important because they don't give importance to logic. Look, in this line says the logic is subordinated to rhetoric and is reserved to serve the purposes of persuasion. Two movements exerted a profound influence on the philosophy of the Italian Renaissance, Scholasticism and Humanism, both of which began to take root in northern Italy around 1300. The centers of Scholasticism were the universities where philosophy teaching was based on Aristotelian corpus, in particular the works of logic and natural philosophy. Renaissance philosophy needs also to be distinguished from the earlier style of Scholasticism philosophy, and Renaissance philosophy, at least originally, was in part a reaction against the philosophy of the academic and ecclesiastical world. It is convenient to distinguish Renaissance from early modern philosophy. That means in 1300, in the year 1300, in northern Italy, two movements influence the Italian Renaissance. One is Scholasticism and another one is Humanism. And Renaissance philosophy was a reaction against the philosophy of academic and ecclesiastical world. And the center of Scholasticism, where the main purpose of Scholasticism philosophy was based on Aristotelian philosophy. Humanism takes philosophy out of the schoolroom. So What is the role of humanism in Renaissance philosophy? It takes philosophy out of the schoolroom. In the late 16th century, philosophy is to treat as a subject independent of theology. If you watch our previous video on Renaissance and philosophy and Italy, you will see that there we talk about Renaissance philosophy was a part of theology, but here it says that and philosophy was not important at that time. Only utilitarian importance are given on school, not philosophy. But here it says that humanism takes philosophy out of the schoolroom, and in the late 16th century, philosophy is to treat as a subject independent of theology. That means philosophy and theology, this connection broke. And who broke this connection? Humanism, the aspect in which Renaissance philosophy is most obviously different from that of modern philosophy is in its willingness to use arguments that rely upon appeal to traditional authorities. Renaissance philosophers believed or affected to believe that they were reviving the thought of the ancients. So what Renaissance philosophers believe? They believe that they are reviving the thought of the ancients. Some of the early modern philosophers like Gassendi, a Renaissance face and indeed philosophy could still be presented in a Renaissance style right through the 17th, even in the 18th century. So here three things we need to be noticed. Number one is humanism takes philosophy out of the schoolroom. Second one is philosophy start to treat as independent of theology because of humanism. And third one is the Renaissance philosophy is most obviously different from modern philosophy in its willingness to use arguments that rely upon appeal to traditional authorities. Now come to the Avorrist part. The adjective Avorrist was certainly used in the Renaissance. To whom? To those who are opponents of the philosophers in question, those who oppose philosophy. An Avorrist is not a philosopher who simply used one of the Arabic philosophers' commentaries on Aristotle, since most Socrates philosophers and theologians did that without bringing their own orthodoxy into question. Whatever the deeper resemblance between patriarchal humanism and Avorrism as forms of culture, it is nevertheless clear that the humanist movement called for a radical change in the conception of what philosophy was. So, Avorists was who were opponents of philosophers in question. Second, Avorist was not a philosopher who just simply used Arabic philosophers' commentaries on Aristotelian philosophy. Since most philosophers and theologians, Socrates philosophers and theologians does that without bringing their own orthodoxy into question. But Avorists are who questions philosophy with their own orthodox thought. Whatever the deeper resemblance between patriarchal humanism and Avorrism is, it is nevertheless clear that humanist movement called for a radical change. So what is the purpose of humanist movement? The purpose for humanist movement was for a radical change in the conception of what philosophy was and what it was for. So that is it for today's video, guys. If you like this video, please like, subscribe and share with your friends. Thank you.